What is going on, everybody? Welcome back, Daves-Raves. Today, we're coming back with it. We got a whopping 56 pages to read. Chapter 4. Well, Part 2, June of 1958. My surface is myself, under which to witness your youth is buried. Roots. Everybody has roots. William Clark Williams, Patterson. Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do. That ain't no cure for the summertime blues. Eddie Cochran. Cochran? Chapter 4. Ben Hanscom Takes a Fall. Around 11:45 p.m., one of the Steves serving first class on the Omaha to Chicago run, United Air Flights 41, get one hell of a shock. She thinks for a few moments that the man in 1A has died. When he boarded at Omaha, she thought to herself, "Oh boy, here comes trouble." He's just drunk as a lord. The stink of whiskey around his head reminded her fleetingly of the cloud of dust that always surrounds. Nervous about first service. Oh, the dirty little boy in the peanut strip. Pigpen, his name is. AD, welcome in. Spooky. The stink of whiskey around the dirty little. Oh, Pigpen, his name is. She was nervous about first service, which is the booze service. She was sure he would ask for a drink, and probably a double. Then she would have to decide whether or not to serve him. Also, just to add to the fun, there have been thunderstorms all along the route tonight, and she is quite sure that at some point the man, a lanky guy dressed in jeans and chambray, began unpacking. What the hell is chambray? Chambray? I've never heard of that kind of shirt. But when first service came along, the tall man ordered nothing more than a glass of club soda, just as polite as he could want. His service light has not gone on, and the stew forgets all about him soon enough, because the flight is a busy one. The flight is, in fact, the kind you want to forget as soon as it's over, one of those during which you just might, if you had time, have a few questions about the possibility of your own survival. United 41 Slaloms? Um, SLALOMs? S? Hey, Amber, welcome in. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, yo. United 41 slaloms between the ugly pockets of thunder and lightning, like a good skier going downhill. The air is very rough. The passengers exclaim and make wheezy jokes about the lightning they can see flickering on and off in the thick pillars of cloud around the plane. "Mommy, is God taking pictures of the angels?" the little boy asks, and his mother, who is looking rather green, laughs shakily. First service turns out to be the only service on 41 that night. The seatbelt sign goes on 20 minutes into the flight and stays on. All the same, the stewardess staying in the aisles, answering the call buttons which go off like the strings of polite society firecrackers. "Ralph is busy tonight," the head stew said to her. They passed in the aisle. The head stew is going back to tourists with a fresh supply of airsick bags. It is half code, half joke. Ralph is always busy on bumpy flights. The plane lurches. Someone cries out softly. The stewards turn in a bit and puts a hand to catch her balance, and looks directly into the staring, sightless eyes of a man at MIA. "Oh my dear God, he's dead," she thinks. "The liquor before he got down." The bumps, his heart, scared to death. The lanky man's eyes are on hers. They are not seeing her. They do not move. They are perfectly glazed. Surely they are the eyes of a dead man. The stew turns away from that awful gaze, her own heart pumping away in her throat at a runaway rate, wondering what to do, how to proceed, thanking God that at least the man has no seatmate to perhaps scream and start a panic. She decides she will have to notify first the head stew, and then the male crew up front. Perhaps they can wrap a blanket around him and close his eyes. The pilot will keep the beltlight on even if the air smooths out, so no one comes forward to use a John. And when the other passengers deplane, they'll think he's just asleep. These thoughts go through her mind rapidly, and she turns back for a confirming look, the dead, sightless eyes fixed upon hers. And then the corpse picks up his glass of club soda and sips from it. Okay. I wasn't expecting it to take that turn. Just then, the plane staggers again, tilts, and the stew's little stream of surprise is lost in the other, heartier cries of fear. The man's eyes move them, not much, but enough so she understands that he is alive and seeing her. And then she thinks, why, I thought when he got up on thought in his mid-50s, he was nowhere near that old, in spite of the graying hair. She goes to him, although she can hear the impatient chime of call buttons behind her. Ralph is indeed busy tonight. After they're perfectly safe landing at O'Hare, 30 minutes from now, the stews will dispose of 70 air-sick bags. Everything okay, sir? She asks, smiling. The smile feels false, unreal. Everything is fine and well, the lanky man says. She glances at the first-class stub, tacked into a little slot on his seat back, and sees that his name is Hanscom. Fine and well. But it's a bit bumpy tonight, isn't it? You've got your work cut out for you, Nick. Don't bother with me, He offers her a ghastly smile. A smile that makes her think of scarecrows flapping in the dead November fields. I'm fine and well. You looked dead. A little under the weather. I was thinking of the old days, he says. I only realized earlier tonight that there was such a thing as old days. At least as far as I myself have been concerned. More call buttons chime. Pardon me, stewardess, someone calls nervously. Well, if you're quite sure you're alright. I was thinking about a dam I built with some friends of mine, Ben Hanscom said. The first friends I ever had, I guess. They were building the dam one night. He stops, looks startled, then laughs. It is an honest laugh, almost the carefree laugh of a boy. It sounds very odd in this jouncing, bucking plan. Luckily, the stragglers joined. When I dropped in on them, and that's almost literally what I did. Anyway, they were making a hell of a mess with that dame. Remember that. Stewardess! Excuse me, sir. I ought to get back about my more pointed runs again. Of course you should. She hurries away, glad to be rid of that gaze. That deadly, almost hypnotic gaze. Ben Hanscom turns his head into the window and looks out. Lightning goes off inside huge thunderheads 9 miles off the starboard wing. In the star flashes of light, the clouds look like huge transparent brains filled with bad thoughts. Like huge transparent brains filled with bad thoughts, sorry. He feels in the pockets of his vest, but the silver dollars are gone. One of it out of his pockets and into where he leaves. Suddenly, he wished he had saved at least one of them. Might have come in handy. Of course, he could go down to any bank. When we weren't bumping around 27,000 feet, you could. You get a handful of silver dollars. But you can't do anything with the lousy copper sandwiches the government was trying to pass off as real coins these days. And for werewolves and vampires, and all manner of things that squirm by starlight, it was silver you wanted. Honest silver. You needed silver to stop a monster. You needed. I need to turn the page. Page is stuck. There we go. He closed his eyes. The air around him was full of chimes. The plane rocked and rolled and bumped, and the air was full of chimes. Chimes? No. Bells. It was bells. It was the bell. The bell of all hells. The bell of all bells. The one you wanted for all your year once the new school were off again. And that always happened by the end of the first week. The bell, the one that signaled freedom again, the apotheosis of all school bells. Ben Hanscom sits in his first class seat, suspended amid the thunders at 27,000 feet. His face turned to the window, and he feels the wall of time grow suddenly thin. Some terrible, wonderful Paris, Peristala. Hang on. How am I supposed to pronounce this, chat? Paristalsis? Peristal. Peristalysis? I'm not sure what that means. Has begun to take place. Thinks, my God, I'm being digested by my own past. The lightning plays fitfully across his face, and although he does not know it, the day has just turned. May 28th, 1985. And it became May 29th. Over the dark and stormy country, there is Western Illinois tonight. Farmer's back store with planting sleep like the dead below and dream their quicksilver dreams, and who knows what may move in their barns and their cellars, in their fields and the lightning walks and the thunder talks. No one knows these things. They know only that power is loose in the night, and the air is crazy with the big volt of the storm. But it bells at 27,000 feet as the plane breaks into the clear air again, as its motion steadies again, as it bells. It is the bell as Ben Hanscom sleeps, and he sleeps the wall between past and present, disappears completely, and he tumbles backward through years like a man falling down a deep well. Wells time traveler, perhaps, falling with a broken iron rung in one hand, down and down in the land of Morlocks, where machines pound on and on in the tunnels of the night. It's 1981, 1977, 1969, and suddenly he is here in June of 1958. Bright summerlight is everywhere, and behind sleeping eyelids, Ben Hanscom's pupils contact at the command of his dreaming brain, which sees not the darkness which lies over western Illinois, but the bright sunlight of a June day in Derry, Maine, 27 years ago. Bells, the bell. School. School is out. Part 2. Or, mini chapters here. I think there's like 8 total out of like the 54 pages. The sound of the bell went burning up and down the halls of Derry School, a big brick building which stood on Jackson Street. And at its sound, The children in Ben Hanscom's fifth grade class room raised a spontaneous cheer. Woohoo! And Mrs. Douglas, usually the strictest of teachers, made no effort to quell them. Perhaps she knew it would have been impossible. Children, she called when the cheer died. May I have your attention for a final moment? Now a babble of excited chatter, mixed with a few groans, rose in the classroom. Miss Douglas was holding the report cards in her hand. Oh boy, report cards. I hate report cards. Me personally. I personally hate report cards. Mm. Now a babble of excited chatter, mixed with a few groans, rose in the class array. I sure hope I pass, Sally Moore said trippily to Bev Marsh, who sat in the next row. Sally was bright, pretty, vivacious. Bev was also pretty, but there was nothing vivacious about her this afternoon. About this afternoon. About her this afternoon. Last day of school or not. She sat looking moodily down at her penny loafers. There was a fading yellow bruise on one side of her cheek. I don't give a shit if I do or not, Bev said. Sally sniffed. Ladies don't use such language, the sniff said. Then she turned to Greta Bowie. It had probably only been the excitement of the bell, signaling the end of another school year that had caused Sally to slip and speak to Beverly anyhow, Ben thought. Sally Moore and Greta Bowie both came from rich families, with houses on West Broadway, while Bev came to school from one of those slummy apartment buildings on Lower Main Street. Lower Main Street and West Broadway were only a mile and a half apart, but even a kid like Bev or like Ben knew that the real distance was like the distance between Earth and the planet Pluto. Ho ho! When Pluto was still a planet. Pluto is still a planet. Oh yeah. Um, Pluto. All you had to do was look at Beverly Marsh's cheap sweater, her too big skirt that probably came from the Salvation Army thrift box, and her scuffed penny whippers to know just how far one was from the other. Ben still liked Beverly better, a lot better. Sally and Greta had nicer clothes, and he guessed they probably had their hair permed or waved or whatever or something every month or so. But he didn't think that changed the basic facts at all. They could get their hair permed every day and still be a couple conceited snots. He thought Beverly was nicer and much prettier, although he never in a million years would have dared say such a thing to her. But still, sometimes, in the heart of winter, when the light outside seemed yellow sleepy, like a cat curled up on a sofa, when Mrs. Douglas was yellow sleepy, when Mrs. Douglas was droning on about mathematics, how to carry a long division, or how to find the common denominator of two fractions so you could add them, or reading the questions from Shining Bridges, or talking about adding them. And I had to take a sip of water and lost my spot. Sorry, chat. or reading the questions from Shining Bridges, or talking tin pauses in Paraguay. On those days, when it seemed that school would never end, it didn't matter if it didn't, because all the world outside was slush. On those days, Ben would sometimes look sideways at Beverly, stealing her face, and his heart would both hurt desperately and somehow grow brighter at the same time. He supposed he had a crush on her, or was in love with her, and that was why it was always Beverly he thought of when the Penguins came on the radio singing Earth Angel, my darling dear, love you all the time. Yeah, it was stupid, alright. Slop Bailey used Kleenex, but it was alright, too, because he would never tell. He thought that fat boys were probably only allowed to love pretty girls inside. If he told anyone how he felt, not that he had anyone to tell, that person would probably laugh until he had a heart attack. And if he ever told Beverly, she would either laugh herself bad or make retching noises of disgust. Worse. Now please come up as soon as I call your name. Paul Anderson, Carla Bordeaux, Greta Bowie, Calvin Clark, Sissy Clark. As she called their names, Mrs. Douglas' fifth grade class came forward one by one, except for the Clark twins, who came together as always, hand in hand, indistinguishable except for the length of their white blonde hair and the fact that she wore a dress while he wore jeans. Took their buff-colored report cards with the American flag and the Pledge of Allegiance on the front, and the Lord's Prayer on the back, walked sedately out of the classroom, and pounded down the hall where the big front doors had been chalked open. And then they simply ran out into summer and were gone. Some on bikes, some skipping, some riding invisible horses and slapping their hands against the sides of their thighs to manufacture hoof puts. Some with arms slung about each other, singing, mine eyes have been the glory of the burning of the spoon, to the tune of the battle hymn of the Republic. Marcia Fadden, Frank Frick, Ben Hanscom. He rose, stealing his last glance at Beverly Marsh's for the summer, or so he thought then, and went forward to Mrs. Douglas's desk. An 11-year-old kid with a can roughly the size of New Mexico said compacted. Wait, what? He rose and went forward to Mrs. Douglas' desk. An 11-year-old kid with a can roughly the size of New Mexico. Said can packed into a pair of horrid raw new blue jeans that showed little darts of light from the copper rivets and went whist, whist, whist as his big thighs brushed together. His hips swung girlishly. His stomach slid from side to side. He was wearing a baggy sweatshirt because he was deeply ashamed of his chest and had been since the first day of school after the Christmas vacation, when he had worn one of the new Ivy League shirts his mother had given him. Belch Huggins, who was a sixth grader, had called, "Hey, you guys, look at what Santa Claus brought Ben Hanscom for Christmas. A big set of titties." Belch had nearly collapsed with the deliciousness of his wit. Others had laughed as well, a few of them girls. The hole leading into the underworld had opened before him at that very moment. Ben would have dropped into it without a sound, or perhaps with the faintest murmur of gratitude. Since that day, he wore sweatshirts. He had four of them, the baggy brown, the baggy green, and two baggy blues. It was one of the few lines that he had ever had. In the course of his mostly complacent childhood, he felt compelled to draw in the dust. And if you had seen Beverly Marsh giggling with the others that day, you suppose he would have died. It's been a pleasure having you here, Benjamin, Mrs. Douglas said, as she handed with his report card. Thank you, Mrs. Douglas. A mocking falsetto wavered from somewhere at the back of the room. C'est cool, Mr. Douglas. It was Henry Bowers, of course. Henry was in Ben's fifth grade class instead of his own sixth grade. Was from Belch Huggins and Victor Chris, because he had been kept back the year before. Ben had an idea that Bowers was going to stay back again. His name had not been called when Mrs. Douglas handed out the ring cards, and that meant trouble. Ben was uneasy about this, because if Henry did not, what up, Brooks? Welcome to Strand. Because if Henry did not stay back again, Ben himself would be partly responsible, and Henry knew it. During the year's final test of the week before, Mrs. Douglas had reseated them at random by drawing their names from a hat on her desk. Ben had ended up sitting next to Henry Bowers in the last row. As always, Ben curled his arms around his paper and then bent close to it, feeling the somehow comforting press of his gut against his desk, looking at his bebop pencil occasionally for inspiration. About halfway through Tuesday's examination, which happened to be math, a whisper drifted across the aisle to Ben. It was as low and uncaring, expert as a whisper of a veteran con passing a message in the prison exercise yards. Let me copy. Ben had looked to his left and directly into the blackened, furious eyes of Henry Bowers. Henry was a big boy even for 12. His arms and legs were thick and farm muscle. His father, who was reputed to be crazy, had a little spread out at the end of Kansas Street, near the Newport town line, and Henry put in at least 30 hours a week hoeing, weeding, planting, digging rocks, cutting wood, and reaping, if there was anything to reap. Henry's hair was cut in an angry-looking flat top, short enough for the white of his scalp to show through. He butch-waxed the front of the tube he always carried in the hip pocket of his jeans. And as a result, the hair just above his forehead looked like the teeth of an oncoming power mower. An odor of sweat and juicy fruit gum always hung about him. He wore a pink motorcycle jacket. What the fuck? Really? He wore a pink motorcycle jacket with an eagle on the back to school. Once a fourth grader was unwise enough to laugh at that jacket, Henry had turned on that little squirt. Enough limber as a there. Henry had turned on that little squirt, limber as a weasel, and quick as an adder, and double pumped the little squirt with one work-grimmed fist. The squirt lost 3 front teeth. Henry got a 2-week vacation from school. Ben had hoped, with the unfocused yet burning hope of the downtrodden terrorists, that Henry would be expelled instead of suspended. No such luck. Bad pennies always turned up. His suspension over, Henry had swaggered back into the schoolyard, balefully resplendent. Resplendent? Yeah, resplendent. In his pink motorcycle jacket, hair butch waxed so heavily that seemed to scream up from the skull. Both eyes bore and puffed, colorful traces of the beating his crazy father had administered for fighting in the play yard. The traces of his beating eventually faded. For the kids who had to somehow coexist with Henry at Derry, the lesson did not. To the best of Ben's knowledge, no one had said anything about Henry's pink motorcycle jacket with the eagle on the back since then. Oh, my Bluetooth disconnected. Okay. I didn't realize that, chat. My bad. Lovely. Hopefully, you guys can still hear me okay enough. Can I get a mic check to if can y'all hear me? Yes, no, audio check, please. Alright, so I'll have to go to my own stream real quick. Alright, you can hear me? Alright, cool beans. Alright, cool beans. My apologies. Sorry, chat. When he whispered grimly at Ben to let him copy, three thoughts had gone skyrocketing through Ben's mind, which was every bit as lean and quick as his body was obese, in a space of seconds. The first was that if Miss Douglas caught Henry cheating answers off his paper, both of them would get zeros on their tests. The second off his paper, both of them would get zeros on their tests. The second was if they didn't let Henry copy, Henry, yeah, what up, Exxon? Henry would almost surely catch him after school and minister the fabled double pump to him, probably with Huggins holding one arm, Chris holding the other. These were the thoughts of a child, and there was nothing surprising about that, because he was a child. The third and last thought, however, was more sophisticated, almost adult. He might get me all right, but maybe I can keep out of his way for the last week of school. I'm pretty sure I am. Can, but really, try. And he'll forget over the summer, I think. Yeah, he's pretty stupid. If he flunks his test, maybe he'll stay back again. If he stays back again, I'll get ahead of him. I won't be in the same room with him anymore. I'll get to go to junior high before he does. I might be free. Let me copy, Henry whispered again. His black eyes were now blazing, demanding. Ben shook his head and curled his arm more tightly around his paper. Get you, fat boy, Henry whispered, a little louder now. His paper was so far an utter blank save for his name. He was desperate. If he flunked his exam and stayed back again, his father would beat his brains out. You let me copy or I'll get you bad. Ben shook his head again, his jowls quivering. He was scared, but he was also determined. Yo, what's Sweaty ready? Ben shook his head again. He was scared, but he was also determined. He realized that for the first time in his life, he had consciously committed himself to a course of action. That also frightened him, although he didn't exactly know why. It would be long years before he would realize it was just the cold boldness of his calculations, the careful and pragmatic counting scared him even more than Henry had scared him. Henry, he might be able to dodge. Adulthood, where he would possibly think such a way all the time, would get him in the end. Is someone talking back there? Mrs. Douglas said to them. Had said them very clearly. If so, I want it to stop right now. Silence had prevailed for the next 10 minutes. Young heads remained studiously bent over the examination sheets, which smelled of fragrances, mimeograph ink, and then Henry's whisper had floated across the aisle again, thin, just audible, chilling in the calm assurance of its promise. You're dead, fat boy. Alright, chat, part 3 real quick. I need to go grab some water real quick because it's getting a little warm in my room. So we're going to do a little BRB. Just give me 2 minutes. Not even 2 minutes. Just 30 seconds. So I need to grab water.
Can I see the email?
Huh?
The email.
I am streaming right now. I'm back, chat. Sorry about that. But hey, you gotta have water, you gotta have water, am I right? Shout out to the one in chat. Three. Ben took his rank card and escaped, grateful to whatever gods there are for 11-year-old fat boys that Henry Bowers had not, by virtue of alphabetical order, been allowed to escape the classroom first, so he could wait for Ben outside. He did not run. He did not run down the corridor like the other children. He could run, and quite fast for a kid his size. But he was actually aware of how funny he looked when he did. He walked fast, though, and emerged from his cool book-smelling hall and into the bright June sunshine. He stood, with his face turned up into the sunshine, for a moment, grateful for its warmth and his freedom. September was a million years from today. The calendar might say something different. But what was the calendar? What was a lie? Such a lie. Said was a lie. The summer would be much longer than the sum of its days, and it belonged to him. He felt as tall as a standpipe, and as wide as a whole town. Someone bumped him hard. Pleasant thoughts of the summer lying before him were driven from Ben's mind as he tottered wildly for balance on the edge of the stone steps. He grabbed the iron railing just in time to save himself from a nasty tumble. Get out of my way, you tub of guts. It was Victor Chris, his hair combed back in an Elvis pompadour and gleaming with brow cream. He went down the steps and along the walk to the front gate, hands in his pockets of his jeans, shirt collar turned up hood style, cleats on his engineer boots, dragging and tapping. Ben, his heart still beating rapidly from his fright, saw that Belch Huggins was standing across the street, having a butt. He raised a hand to Victor and passed him the cigarette when Victor joined him. Victor took a drag, handed it back to Belch, then pointed to where Ben stood, not halfway down the steps. He said something, and they both broke up. Ben's face flamed dully. They always got you. It was like fate or something. You like this place? So well you're standing here all day? The voice at his elbow. Ben turned, and his face became hotter still. It was Beverly Marsh. Her auburn hair a dazzling cloud around her head, and upon her shoulders. Her eyes a lovely gray-green. Her sweater, pushed at her elbows, was frayed around the neck and almost as baggy as Ben's sweatshirt. Too baggy, certainly. Tell if she was getting any chest works yet. But Ben didn't care. When love comes before puberty, it can come in waves so clear and so powerful that no one can stand against its simple imperative. Ben made no effort to do so now. He simply gave in. He felt both foolish and exalted, as miserably embarrassed as he had ever been in his life, yet inarguably blessed. These hopeless emotions mixed in a heady brew that left him feeling both sick and joyful. No, he croaked, guess not. A large grin spread across his face. He knew how idiotic it must look, but he could not seem to pull it back. Well, good, 'cause school's out, you know. Thank God. Have another croak. He had to clear his throat, and his blush deepened. Have a nice summer, Beverly. You too, Ben. See you next year. She went quickly down the steps, and Ben saw everything with his lover's eye. The bright tartan of her skirt, the bounce of her red hair against the back of her sweater, her milky complexion, a small healing cut across the back of one calf, and, for some reason, that the last caught another weight of him to swoop him so powerfully he had gripped the railing again. The feeling was huge, inarticulate, mercifully brief, perhaps the sexual signal meaningless to his body, where endorsing glands still slept almost without dreaming, yet as bright as a summer heat lightning. A bright golden ankle bracelet she wore just above her right liver, winking back at the sun at little flushes. A sound, some sort, shout out to the 3 in chat. A sound, some sort of sound, escaped him. He went down the steps like a feeble old man and stood at the bottom, watching until she turned and disappeared beyond the high hedge that separated the schoolyard from the sidewalk. He only stood there for a moment, and then, while the kids were still streaming past in yelling, running groups, he remembered Henry Bowers and hurried around the building. He crossed the little kids' playground, running his fingers across the swing chains to make them jingle and stepping over the teeter-totter boards. He went out to the much smaller gate which gave on Charter Street and headed off to the left, never looking back at the stone pile where he had spent much smaller gate which left, never looking back at the stone pile where he had spent most of his weekdays over the last 9 months. He stuffed his ranking card in the back pocket and started to whistle. He was wearing a pair of Keds, but so far as he could tell, their soles never touched the sidewalk for 8 blocks or so. School had let out past 9, just past noon. His mother would not be home past till 6, because on Friday she went right to his shop and save after work. The rest of the day was his. He walked down to the park for a while. He went down to McCarran Park for a while and sat under a tree, not doing anything, but occasionally whispering, "I love Beverly Marsh," under his breath, feeling more lightheaded. Yeah, twice. Yeah. Under his breath, feeling much more lightheaded and more romantic each time he said it. At one point, as a bunch of boys drifted into the park and began choosing up sides for a scratch baseball game, somebody ban that person, please. He whispered the words, Beverly Hanscom, twice, and then had to put his face in the grass until it cooled his burning cheeks. Shortly after that, he got up and headed across the park toward Costello Avenue. He walked him 5 more blocks, would take him to the public library, which, he supposed, had been his destination all along. He was almost out of the park when a sixth grader named Peter Gordon saw him and yelled, "Hey, Tits, wanna play? We need somebody to be right field." There was an explosion of laughter. Ben escaped as fast as he could, hunching his neck down into his collar like a turtle drawing into his shell. Still, he considered himself lucky, all in all. On another day, the boys might have chased him, maybe just to rank him out, maybe to roll him out in the dirt and to see if he could cry. Today, they were about to get absorbed into the game going. Whether or not you could use fingers or get toesies or get topsies when you threw the bat for the first picks, which team would get their guaranteed last ups, all the rest. I know, I understand none of that. Ben happily left to Arcana, proceeding to the first ball game of the summer, and went his way. 3 blocks down to Costello. Damn notifications. Shortly after that, he got up and headed across the park toward Costello Avenue. Oh, yeah. 3 blocks down Costello, he spied something interesting, perhaps even profitable, under someone's front hedge. Glass gleamed through the ripped side of an old paper bag. Ben hooked the bag out onto the sidewalk with his foot. It seems his luck really was in. There were 4 beer bottles and 4 big soda bottles inside. The biggies were worth a nickel each. The Renegolds 2 pennies. 28 cents under someone's heads. Just waiting for some kid to come along and scoff it up. Some lucky kid. That's me. Ben said happily, having no idea what the rest of the day had in store. He got moving again, holding the bag by the bottom so it wouldn't break open. The Costello Avenue Market was a block farther down the street, and Ben turned in. He swapped the bottles for cash, and most of the cash for candy. Sounds about right to me. He stood at the penny candy window, pointing, delighted as always, by the ratcheting sound of the sliding door made when the storekeeper slid it along the track, which was lined with ball bearings. He got 5 red liquor slips and 5 black 10 root beer barrels, 2 for a penny, a nickel strip of buttons, 5 to a row, 5 rows on a nickel strip, and he ate them right off the paper. A pack of Lick and Maid, and a package of Pez for his Pez gun at home. Ben walked out with a small brown sack of candy in his hand and 4 cents in the right front pocket of his jeans. He had looked at his brown bag with a slow sweetness. Like Dot suddenly tried to surface. You keep eating this way, Beverly Marsh is never gonna look at you. But it was an unpleasant thought, and so he pushed it away. He went easily enough. This was a thought used to being banished. This was a thought he was used to being banished. Someone asked him, "Hey Ben, are you lonely?" He would have looked at that someone with real surprise. The question never occurred to him. He had no friends, but he had his books and his dreams, and he had rebel models. He had a gigantic set of Lincoln logs, built all sorts of stuff with them. His mother had exclaimed more than once that Ben's Lincoln Logs house looked better than some real ones that came from blueprints. He had a pretty good erector set too. That didn't sound dirty at all. He was open for the superset when his birthday came around in October. With that one, you could build a clock that could really tell time in a car with real gears in it. Lonely? You want to ever ask in return? Honestly fooled. Huh? What? A child blind from birth doesn't even know he's blind until someone tells him. Even then, he only has the most academic idea of what blindness is. Only the formerly sighted have a real grip on the thing. Ben Hanscom had no sense of being lonely because he had never been anything but. If the condition had been new or more localized, he might have understood. But loneliness both encompassed his life and overreached it. It simply was. Like his double jointed thumb or his funny little jag on one of his front teeth. The little jag his tongue began running over whenever he was nervous. Beverly was a sweet dream. The candy was a sweet reality. The candy was his friend. So he told the alien thought he would take a hike, and it went quietly, without causing any fuss whatsoever. And between Costello Avenue Market and the library, he gobbled all the candy in the sack. He obviously meant to save the Pez for watching TV that night. He liked to load them into little plastic Pez guns hand grip one by one. Liked to hear the accepting click of the small spring inside, and liked most of all to shoot them into his mouth one by one, like a kid committing suicide by sugar. Whirly Birds was on tonight, with Kenneth Toby as a fearless helicopter pilot, and Dragnet, where the cases were true, the names had been changed to protect the innocent. And his favorite cop show of all time, Highway Patrol, which starred Roger Crawford as Highway Patrolman Dan Matthews. Roger Crawford was Ben's personal hero. Roger Crawford was fast, Roger Crawford was mean. Roger Crawford took absolutely no shit from nobody. And best of all, Roger Crawford was fat. There you go. He arrived at the corner of Costello and Kansas Street, where he crossed to the public library. It was really two buildings. The old stone structure in front, built with lumber baron money in 1890, and the new standalone buildings behind, which housed the children's library. The adult library in front and the children's library behind were connected by a glass corridor. This close to downtown, Kansas Street was one way, so Ben only looked in one direction, right, before crossing. If he had looked to the left, he would have only gotten a nasty shot. Standing in the shade, with big old tree in the wall of the Dairy Community House, a block list were Belch Huggins, Richard Chris, and Henry Dowens. 5. Let him go, Hank. Victor was almost panting. Henry watched the fat little prick scutter across the street, his belly bouncing. The cowlick at the back of his head springing back and forth like a goddamn slinky, his ass wiggling like a girl's inside his new blue jeans. He estimated the distance between the three of them here on the community house lawn at Hanscom. And between Hanscom and the safety of the library. He thought they could probably get him before he made it inside, but Hanscom might start screaming. He wanted to put it past little pansy. If he did, an adult might interfere, and Henry wanted no interference. The Douglas bitch had told Henry that he had flunked both English and math. He was passing him, she said, but he would have to take 4 weeks of summer makeup. Henry would have rather have stayed back. If he had stayed back, his father would have beaten up only once. If he had stayed back, his father would have beaten him up once. With Henry at school 4 hours a day, for 4 weeks of the farm's business season, his father was apt to beat him up at least a half dozen times. Maybe even more. He was reconciled to this grim future only because he intended to pass everything on to that fat little body baby fag this afternoon with interest. Yeah, let's go, Bill said. We'll wait for him to come out. They watched Ben open one of the big double doors and go inside. And then they sat down and smoked cigarettes until a traveling salesman jokes and waited for him to come back out. Eventually, Henry knew he would. And when he did, Henry was going to make sure. Yeah, what up, Clet? How's it going, my guy? Eventually, Henry knew he would. When he did, Henry was going to make sure he was sorry he was ever born. Ben loved the library. Yeah, need more water. Now reading will make your throat thirsty, y'all. 6. Ben loved the library. He loved the way it was always cool. Even on the hottest day of long summer, he loved its murmuring quiet, broken only by occasional whispers. The faint thud of a librarian stamping books and cards, or the riffle pages being turned in the periodicals room where the old men hung out, reading newspapers when he had been threaded into long sticks. He loved the quality of the light, which slanted through the high, narrow windows in the afternoons, or glowed in lazy pools thrown by the chain-hung globes on winter evenings while the wind whined outside. He liked the smell of the books, a spicy smell, faintly fabulous. He would sometimes walk through the adult stacks, looking at thousands of volumes, imagining a world of lives inside each one. The way he sometimes walked along the street in the burning smoke-hazed twilight of late October afternoon. The sun only a bitter orange line on the horizon, imagining the lives going on behind the windows, people laughing, or arguing, arranging flowers, or feeding kids or pets, or their own faces while they watched the boob tube. We liked the way the glass corridor connecting the old building to the children's library was always hot, even in the winter, unless there had been a couple of cloudy days. Miss Starlet, the head children's librarian, told him that told him that was caused. One second, chat. Why she can't text? Why? Yeah. Sorry about that, chat. Yeah. He liked the children's library as well. Oh, man. People laughing or arguing, arranging. Children's library is always hot, even in the winter, unless there have been a couple of cloudy days. Miss Starrett, the head children's librarian, welcome in, whoever just joined, told him that was caused by something called the greenhouse effect. Ben had been delighted with that idea. Years later, he would build a hotly debated BBC communication center in London. And the arguments might rage for 1,000 years. Still, no one would know, except for Ben himself, that the communication center was nothing but a glass corridor. The Derry Public Library stood on end. He liked the children's library as well, although it had none of the shadowy charm he felt in the old library, with its globes and curving its iron staircases, too narrow for two people to pass upon them. One always had to back up. The children's library was bright and sunny, a little noisier, in spite of the "let's be quiet, shall we" signs that were posted around. Most of the noise usually came from Pooh's Corner, where the little kids went to look at picture books. When Ben came in today, story hour had just begun there. Miss Davies, the pretty young librarian, was reading The Three Billy Goats Gruff. Who is that trip-tipping upon my bridge? Trip-shopping upon my bridge? Damn, down to one? Okay. Shout out to the one person still in chat. Miss Davies spoke in the low, growling tones of a troll in the story. Some of the little ones covered their mouths and giggled, but most only watched her most solemnly, accepting the voice of the troll as they accepted the voices of their dreams. And their grave eyes reflected the eternal fascination of the fairy tale. Would the monster be bested, or would it feed? Bright posters were tracked everywhere. Here was a good cartoon kid who had brushed his teeth until his mouth foamed like the muzzle of a mad dog. Here was a bad cartoon kid who was smoking cigarettes. When I grow up, I want to be sick a lot, just like my dad, it said underneath. Here was a wonderful photograph of a billion tiny pinpoints of light flaring in the darkness. The motto beneath said, "One idea placed 1,000 candles. There were invitations to join the scouting experience. A poster voicing the idea that the girls' club of today build the women of tomorrow. There were softball sign-up sheets, community house children's theater sign-up sheets, and of course, one inviting kids to join the summer reading program. Ben was a big fan of the summer reading program. You got a map of the United States when you signed up. Then, for every book you read and made a report on, you got a state sticker to look and put on your map. The sticker came complete with the info like the state bird, the state flower, the year admitted to the Union, and what presidents, if any, had ever come from the state. When you're all 48 stuck on your map, you got a free book. Hell of a good deal. Ben planned to do just the poster suggested. Waste no time. Sign up today. Conspicuous amid this bright, amiable riot of color was a simple, stark poster trapped to the chest cheek-out desk. No cartoons or fancy photographs here. Just black print on white poster paper reading. Remember the curfew? 7 p.m. Derry Police Department. Just looking at it gave Ben a chill. The excitement of getting his rank card, worrying about Henry Bowers, talking with Beverly, starting summer vacation. He had forgotten all about the curfews and the murders. My goodness, how many more pages do I got, chat? I'm just trying to see how much longer we got. I'm sorry. Damn, chat, we still got quite a bit more to go. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it for like another 3 until we hit another mini chapter, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow. So I'll be starting about another 3 or 4 pages. People argued about how many people there have been, but everyone agreed that there have been at least 4 since last winter. 5 if you counted George Denbrough. Hey, Carlita. Many held the opinion that the little Denborough's boy's death must have been some kind of bizarre freak accident. The first everyone was sure of was Betty Ripsom, who had been found the day after Christmas in the area of the turnpike construction on Outer Jackson Street. The girl, who was 13, had been found mutilated and frozen in the muddy earth. This had not been in the paper, nor was it a thing any adult had spoken of to Ben. It was just something he had picked up around the corners of overheard conversations. About 3.5 months later, not long after the trout fishing season had begun, a fisherman working the bank of a stream 20 miles east of Derry had hooked onto something he believed at first to be a stick. It turned out to be a hand, wrist, and first 4 inches of a girl's forearm. I'm sorry, chat, more text messages. About 3.5 months later, not long after the trout fishing began, oh yeah, his hook had snagged this awful trophy by the web of flesh between the thumb and first finger. The state police had found the rest of Cheryl Monica 70 yards farther downstream, caught in a tree that had fallen across the stream the previous winter. It was only luck that the body had been washed into the Pennsylvania and then out to sea in the spring runoff. The little Monica girl had been 16. She was from Derry but did not attend school. 3 years before, she had given birth to a daughter, Andrea. She and her daughter lived at home with Cheryl's parents. Cheryl was a little wild sometimes, but she was a good girl at heart, her sobbing father told the police. Annie keeps asking, "Where's my mommy?" They don't know what to tell her. The girl had been reported missing 5 weeks before the body was found. The police investigation of Cheryl Monica's death began with a logical enough assumption. She had been murdered by one of her boyfriends. She had lots of boyfriends. Many were from the air base up Bangor Way. They were nice boys, most of them, Cheryl's mother said. One of the nice boys had been a 40-year-old Air Force colonel with a wife and 3 children in New Mexico. Another was currently serving time in Shawshank for armed robbery. What up, JJ? A boyfriend, the police thought, or just possibly a stranger. A sex fiend. If it was a sex fiend, he was apparently a fiend for boys as well. In late April, a junior high school teacher on a nature walk with the 8th grade class had spied a pair of red sneakers and a pair of blue corduroy rompers protruding from the mouth of a culvert on Merritt Street. The end of Merritt had been blocked off with the sawhorses. The asphalt had been bulldozed up the previous fall. The turnpike extension were crossed there as well on its way north to Bangor. The body had been that of the 3-year-old Matthew Clements, reported missing by his parents only the day before. His picture had been on the front page of the Daily News. A dark-haired little kid, grinning brashly into the cameras. A Red Sox cap perched on his head. Sorry, shit. The Clements family lived on Kansas Street, all the way on the other side of town. His mother, so stunned by grief that she seemed to exist in a glass bottle of her calm, told police that Matty had been riding his tricycle up and down the sidewalk by beside the house, which stood on the corner of Kansas and South Lane. She went to put her washing in the dryer. When next she looked out the window to check on Matty, he was gone. There had only been his overturned trike on the cross between the sidewalk and the street. One on the back wheels was still spinning lazily. As she looked, it came to a stop. That was enough for Chief Borden. He proposed a 7 o'clock curfew at a special session of City Council that following evening. It was adopted unanimously and went into effect the next day. Small children were to be watched by a qualified adult at all times, according to the story which reported the curfew in the news. The chief went on stage, hooked his thumbs into his gun belt, and showed the children that they had nothing at all to worry about, as long as they followed a few simple rules. Don't talk to strangers. Don't accept rides with people unless you know them well. Always remember that a policeman is your friend, and obey the curfew. 2 weeks ago, A boy Ben knew only vaguely. He was in the other fifth-grade class at Derry Elementary. Had looked into one of the storm drains out by Newbold Street and had seen what looked like a lot of hair floating around in there. This boy, whose name was either Frankie or Freddie Ross, or maybe Roth, had been out prospecting for goodies with the gadget of his own invention, which he called the fabulous gum stick. Alright. Hey, Code, welcome into chat. When he talked about it, he thought about it like that. Capital letters. And maybe neon as well. The fabulous gum stick. With a birch branch. With a birch branch with a big wad of bubble gum stuck on the tip. In his spare time, Freddie, or Frankie, walked around Derry with it, peering into sewers and drains. Sometimes he saw money, pennies mostly, but sometimes a dime or even a quarter. He referred to these latter, for some reason known only to him as quasi-monsters. Once the money was spotted, Frankie, or Freddie, and the fabulous gum stick would swing into action. One downward poke through the grating, and the coin was as good as in his pocket. Ben had heard rumors of Frankie or Freddie and his gum stick long before the kid had vaulted into the limelight by discovering the body of Veronica Gorgon. He's really gross, a kid named Richie Tozier had confided to Ben one day during an activity period. Tozier had confided to Ben one day. My God, for fuck's sakes, I'm streaming. For fuck's sakes, I tell people I'm streaming, and they still want to fucking text me. But look, I don't put my shit on airplane mode. After the most recent horror, oh my gosh, that's bad. Yeah. He's really gross. A kid named Richie Tozier confided to Ben one day during activity period. Tozier was a scrawny kid who wore glasses. Ben thought that without them, Tozier probably saw every bit as well as Mr. McGee. His magnified eyes swam behind thick lenses with an expression of perpetual surprise. He also had huge front teeth that had earned him the nickname Bucky Beaver. He was in the same fifth-grade class as Freddie or Frankie. Pokes that gum stick of his sewer down sewer drains all day long, and then he chews gum from the end of it at night. Oh gosh, that's bad. That's White Wabbit, Tozier said, and walked away. Frankie or Freddie? You tell him, Dave. Frankie or Freddie had worked a fabulous gum stick back and forth through the storm drain, believing he'd found a wig. He thought maybe he could dry it out and give it to his mother for her birthday or something. After a few minutes of poking and prodding, just as he was about to give up, a face had floated out of the murky water in the plugged drain. A face with dead leaves plastered to its white cheeks and dirt in its staring eyes. Freddie or Frankie ran home screaming. Veronica Grogan had been in the fourth grade at the Newbold Street Church School, which was run by people of Ben's mother called the Christers. She was buried on what would have been her 10th birthday.